Good. Hello to the folks on YouTube watching the video. Today we're going to concentrate on the Dubliners story, Ivy Day in the Committee Room. We'll first read the story and then we will have a discussion about it. And if you look in the description of this video, you'll find a link to the story on the internet if you care to read along. Alrighty. Ivy Day in the Committee Room. Old Jack raked the cinders together with a piece of cardboard and spread them judiciously over the whitening domes of coal. When the dome was thinly covered, when the dome was thinly covered, his face lapsed into darkness. But as he set himself to fan the fire again, his crouching shadow ascended the opposite wall, and his face slowly re-emerged into light. It was an old man's face, very bony and hairy. The moist blue eyes blinked at the fire, and the moist mouth fell open at times, munching once or twice mechanically when it closed. When the cinders had caught, he laid the piece of cardboard against the wall, sighed, and said, "Ah, that's better now, Mr. O'Connor." Mr. O'Connor, a gray-haired young man, whose face was disfigured by many blotches and pimples, had brought the tobacco for the cigarette into a shapely cylinder. But when spoken to, he undid his handiwork meditatively. Then he began to roll the tobacco again meditatively, and after a moment's thought, decided to lick the paper. Joan.
Did Mr. Tierney say when he'd be back? He asked in a husky falsetto. He didn't say. Mr. O'Connor put his cigarette into his mouth and began to search his pockets. He took out a pack of thin pasteboard cards. "I'll get you a match," said the old man. "Never mind, this'll do," said Mr. O'Connor. He selected one of the cards and read what was printed on it. Municipal Elections, Royal Exchange Ward. Mr. Richard J. Tierney, PLG, respectively, solicits the favor of your vote and influence at the coming election in the Royal Exchange Ward. Mr. O'Connor had been engaged by Mr. Tierney's agent to canvass one part of the ward, but as the weather was inclement, his boots let in the wet. He spent a great part of the day sitting by the fire in the committee room in Wicklow Street with Jack, the old caretaker. They had been sitting thus since the short day had grown dark. It was the 6th of October, dismal and cold out of doors. Next, please.
Mr. O'Connor tore a strip off the card and, lighting it, lit his cigarette. As he did so, the flame lit up a leaf of dark, glossy ivy in the lapel of his coat. The old man watched him attentively and then, taking up the piece of cardboard again, began to fan the fire slowly while his companion smoked. "Ah, yes," he said, continuing, "it's hard to know what way to bring up children. Now, who'd think he'd turn out like that? I sent him to the Christian Brothers, and I've done what I could for him. And there he goes, boozing about. I tried to make him some way decent." He replaced the cardboard wearily. "Only I'm an old man now, I'd change his tune for him. I'd take the stick to his back and beat him while I could stand over him, as I done many a time before. The mother, you know, she cocks him up with this and that. That's what ruins children," said Mr. O'Connor. "To be sure it is," said the old man, "and little thanks you get for it, only impotence. He takes the upper hand of me whenever he sees I've a sup taken. What's the world coming to when sons speaks that way to their fathers, Lois?"
"What age is he?" said Mr. O'Connor. 19, said the old man. "Why don't you put him to something? Sure haven't I never done and a drunken bowsy ever since he left school. I won't keep you, I says. You must get a job for yourself. But sure, it's worse whenever he gets a job. He drinks it all. Mr. O'Connor shook his head in sympathy, and the old man fell silent, gazing into the fire. Someone opened the door of the room and called out, "Hello, is this a Freemasons meeting?" "Who's that?" said the old man. "What are you doing in the dark?" asked a voice. "Is that you, Hines?" asked Mr. O'Connor. "Yes. What are you doing in the dark?" said Mr. Haynes, advancing into the light of the fire. He was a tall, slender man with a light brown mustache. Imminent little drops of rain hung on the brim of his hat, and the collar of his jacket coat was turned up. "Well, Nat," he said to Mr. O'Connor, "how goes it?" Mr. O'Connor shook his head. The old man left the hearth and, stumbling about the room, returned with 2 candlesticks, which he thrust, one after the other, into the fire and carried to the table. A denuded room came into view, and the fire lost all its cheerful color. The walls of the room were bare, except for a copy of an election address. In the middle of the room was a small table on which papers were heaped. Next.
Mr. Hines leaned against the mantelpiece and asked, "Has he paid you yet?" "Not yet," said Mr. O'Connor. "I hope to God he'll not leave us in the lurch tonight." Mr. Hines laughed. "Oh, he'll pay you, never fear," he said. "I hope he'll look smart about it if he means business," said Mr. O'Connor. "What do you think, Jack?" said Mr. Hines satirically to the old man. The old man returned to his seat by the fire, saying, "It isn't but he has it anyway. Not like the other tinker." "What other tinker?" said Mr. Hines. "Colgan," said the old man scornfully. "Is it because Colgan's a working man you say that? What's the difference between a good honest player and a publican, eh? Hasn't the working man as good a right to be in the corporation as anyone else? Aye, and a better right than those Shawneens that are always hat in hand before any fella with a handle to his name. Isn't that so, Matt?" said Mr. Hines, addressing Mr. O'Connor. "I think you're right," said Mr. O'Connor. "Next, please."
One man is a plain, honest man with no hunker sliding about him. He goes in to represent the labor classes. This fellow you're working for only wants to get some job or other. "Of course, the working classes should be represented," said the old man. "The working man," said Mr. Hines, gets all kicks and no halfpence. But its labor produces everything. The working man is not looking for fat jobs for his sons and nephews and cousins. The working man is not going to drag the honor of Dublin in the mud to please a German monarch. "How's that?" said the old man. "Don't you know they want to present an address of welcome to Edward Rex if he comes here next year? What do we want kowtowing to a foreign king?" "Our man won't vote for the address," said Mr. O'Connor. "He goes in on the nationalist ticket. Next, please."
"Won't he?" said Mr. Hines. "Wait till you see whether he will or not. I know him. He's a tricky dicky, Tierney. By God, perhaps you're right, Joe," said Mr. O'Connor. "Anyway, I wish he'd turn up with the spondulics." 3 men fell silent. The old man began to rake more cinders together. Mr. Hines took off his hat, shook it, and then turned down the collar of his coat, displaying as he did so an ivy leaf in the lapel. "If this man was alive," he said, pointing to the leaf, "we'd have to talk of an address of welcome." "We'd have no talk of an address of welcome." "That's true," said Mr. O'Connor. "Musha, God be with them times," said the old man. "There was some life in it then." The room was silent again. Then a bustling little man with a snuffling nose and very cold ears pushed in the door. He walked over quickly to the fire, rubbing his hands as if he intended to produce a spark from them. "No money, boys," he said. "Sit down here, Mr. Henchy," said the old man, offering his chair. "Oh, don't stir, Jack, don't stir," said Mr. Henchy. He nodded curtly to Mr. Hines and sat down on the chair which the old man vacated. "Did you serve on your street?" he asked Mr. O'Connor. "Yes, Mr. O'Connor. beginning to search his pockets for memoranda. Did you call on Grimes? I did. Well, how does he stand? Next.
You wouldn't promise, he said. I won't tell anyone what way I'm going to vote, but I think he'll be all right. Why so? He asked me who the nominations were, and I told him. I mentioned Father Burke's name. I think it'll be all right. Mr. Hinchley began to snuffle and rub his hands over the fire at terrific speed. Then he said, For the love of God, Jack, bring us a bit of coal. There must be some left. The old man went out of the room. It's no go, said Mr. Hinchley, shaking his head. I asked the little shoe boy, but he said, Oh, now, Mr. Hinchley, when I see the work going on properly, I won't forget you. You may be sure. Mean little tinker. Usha. How could you be anything else? What did I tell you, Matt? Said Mr. Hines. Tricky Dicky Cherney. Oh, he's as tricky as they make 'em, said Mr. Hinchley. He hasn't got those little pig's eyes for nothing, blast his soul. Couldn't he pay up like a man instead of, Oh, now, Mr. Hinchley, I must speak to Mr. Fanning. Spent a lot of money. Mean little shoeboy of hell. I suppose he forgets the time his old father kept a hand-me-down shop in Mary's Lane. Is that a fact? Asked Mr. O'Connor. God, yes, said Mr. Hinchley. Did you ever hear that? And the men used to go in on Sunday morning before the houses were open to buy a waistcoat or trousers. Moya. But little Tricky Dicky's old father always had a tricky little black bottle up in a corner. Do you mind now? That's that. That's where he first saw the light. The old man returned with a few lumps of coal which he placed here and there on the fire. That's a nice how do you do, said Mr. O'Connor. How does he expect us to work for him if he won't stump up? Can't help it, said Mr. Hinchley. I expect to find the bailiffs in the hall when I go home. Trina?
Mr. Hines laughed and, shoving himself away from the mantelpiece with the aid of his shoulders, made ready to leave. It'll be all right when King Eddie comes, he said. Well, boys, I'm off for the present. See you later. Bye-bye. He went out of the room slowly. Neither Mr. Henchy nor the old man said anything, but just as the door was closing, Mr. O'Connor, who had been staring moodily into the fire, called out suddenly, Bye, Joe. Mr. Henchy waited a few moments and then nodded in the direction of the door. Tell me, he said across the fire, what brings our friend in here? What does he want? Usha, poor Joe, said Mr. O'Connor, throwing the end of his cigarette into the fire. He's hard up like the rest of us. Mr. Henchy snuffled vigorously and spat so copiously that he nearly put out the fire, which uttered a hissing protest. Next, please. Duncan.
To tell you my private and candid opinion, he said, I think he's a man from the other camp. He's a spy of Colgan's, if you ask me. Just go around and try to find out how they're getting on. They won't suspect you. Do you twig? Ah, poor Joe has a decent skin, said Mr. O'Connor. His father was a decent, respectable man, Mr. Hinchy admitted. Poor old Larry Hines. Many a good turn he did in his day. But I'm greatly afraid our friend is not 19 carat. Damn it. I can understand a fellow being hard up, but what I can't understand is a fellow sponging. Can't he have some spark of manhood about him? He didn't get a warm welcome from me when he comes, said the old man. Let him work for his own side and not come spying around here. I don't know, said Mr. O'Connor dubiously, as he took out cigarette papers and tobacco. I think Joe Hines is a straight man. He's a clever chap, too, with a pen. Do you remember that thing that he wrote, Joan?
Oh, I'm sorry. Some of these hillsiders and Fenians are a bit too clever, if you ask me, said Mr. Henchy. Do you know what my private and candid opinion is about some of those little jokers? I believe half of them are in the pay of the castle. There's no knowing, said the old man. Oh, but I know it for a fact, said Mr. Henchy. They're castle hacks. I don't say Hines. No, damn it. I think he's a stroke above that. But there's a certain little nobleman with a cockeye, you know, the patriot I'm alluding to? Mr. O'Connor nodded. There's a lineal descendant of Major Sir for you, if you like. Oh, the heart's blood of a patriot. That's a fellow now that'd sell his country for fourpence. Aye, and go down his bended knee and thank the almighty Christ he had a country to sell. There was a knock at the door. Come in, said Mr. Henchy. Next, please.
A person resembling a poor clergyman or a poor actor appeared in the doorway. His black clothes were tightly buttoned on his short body, and it was impossible to say whether he wore a clergyman's collar or a layman's, because the collar of his shabby frock coat, the uncovered buttons of which reflected the candlelight, was turned up about his neck. He wore a round hat of hard black felt. His face, shining with raindrops, had the appearance of damp yellow cheese, save where two rosy spots indicated the cheekbones. He opened his very long mouth suddenly to express disappointment, and at the same time opened wide his very bright blue eyes to express pleasure and surprise. "Oh, Father Keown," said Mr. Henchy, jumping up from his chair. "Is that you? Come in." "Oh, no," said Father Keown quickly, pursing his lips as if he were addressing a child. "Won't you come in and sit down?" No, said Father Keown, speaking in a discreet, indulgent, velvety voice. "Don't let me disturb you now. I'm just looking for Mr. Fanning." "He's round at the Black Eagle," said Mr. Henchy. "But won't you come in and sit down a minute?" No, thank you. It was just a little business matter," said Father Keown. "Thank you indeed." He retreated from the doorway, and Mr. Henchy, seizing one of the candlesticks, went to the door to light him downstairs. "Oh, don't trouble, I beg." "No, but the stairs is so dark." No, I can see. Thank you indeed. Are you all right now?" "All right, thanks. Lois."
Mr. Henchy returned with the candlestick and put it on the table. He sat down again at the fire. There was silence for a few moments. "Tell me, John," said Mr. O'Connor, lighting his cigarette with another pasteboard card. "What is he exactly?" "Ask me an easier one," said Mr. Henchy. "Fanning and himself seem to me very thick. They're often in Kavanagh's together. Is he a priest at all?" "Yes, I believe so. I think he's what you call a black sheep. We haven't many of them, thank God, but we have a few. He's an unfortunate man of some kind." "And how does he knock it out?" asked Mr. O'Connor. "Oh, that's another story." "Is he attached to any chapel or church or institution or—" "No," said Mr. Henchy. "I think he's traveling on his own account. God forgive me, he added, I thought he was the dozen of stout." "Is there any chance of a drink itself?" asked Mr. O'Connor. "I'm there too," said the old man. "I asked that little shoeboy 3 times," said Mr. Henchy, "would he send up a dozen of stout. I asked him again now, but he was leaning on the counter in his shirt sleeves, having a deep guster with Alderman Cowley." "Why didn't you remind him?" said Mr. O'Connor. "Well, I couldn't go over while he was talking to Alderman Cowley. I just waited till I caught his eye and said, 'About that little matter I was speaking to you about.'" "That'll be all right," Mr. H. said. "You're sure a little hop on my thumb has forgotten all about it. Next."
"There's some deal on in that quarter," said Mr. O'Connor thoughtfully. "I saw the 3 of them hard at it yesterday at Suffolk Street corner. I think I know the little game they're at," said Mr. Henchy. "You must owe the city fathers money nowadays if you want to be made Lord Mayor. Then they'll make you Lord Mayor. By God, I'm thinking seriously of becoming a city father myself. What do you think? Would I do for the job?" Mr. O'Connor laughed. "So far as owing money goes, driving out of the mansion house," said Mr. Henchy, "in all my vermin, with Jack here standing up behind me in a powdered wig, and make me your private secretary, John. Yes, and I'll make Father Keown my private chaplain. We'll have a family party. Faith, Mr. Henchy, said the old man, you'd keep up better style than some of them. I was talking one day to old Keegan, the porter. And how do you like your new master, Pat, says I to him. You haven't much entertaining now, says I. Entertaining, says he. He'd live on the smell of an oil rag. And do you know what he told me? Now I declare to God I don't believe him. What, said Mr. Henchy and Mr. O'Connor? He told me, what do you think of a Lord Mayor of Dublin sending out for a pound of chops for his dinner? How's that for high living, says he. Wish us, says I, a pound of chops, says he, coming into the mansion house. Wish us, says I, what kind of people is going at all now? Next, please.
At this point, there was a knock at the door, and a boy put in his head. What is it? Said the old man. From the Black Eagle, said the boy, walking in sideways and depositing a basket on the floor with the noise of shaking bottles. The old man helped the boy to transfer the bottles from the basket to the table and counted the full tally. After the transfer, the boy put his basket on his arm and asked, Any bottles? What bottles? Said the old man. Won't you let us drink them first? Said Mr. Henchy. I was told to ask for bottles. Come back tomorrow, said the old man. Here, boy, said Mr. Henchy. Will you run over to O'Farrell's and ask him to lend us a corkscrew? For Mr. Henchy, say. Tell him we won't keep it a minute. Leave the basket there. The boy went out, and Mr. Henchy began to rub his hands cheerfully, saying, Ah, well, he's not so bad after all. He's as good as his word, anyhow. Next, please.
There's no tumbler, said the old man. Oh, don't let that trouble you, Jack, said Mr. Henchy. Many's the good man before now drank out of a bottle. Anyway, it's better than nothing, said Mr. O'Connor. He's not a bad sort, said Mr. Henchy, only Fanning has such a loan of him. He means well, you know, in his own tin pot way. The boy came back with the corkscrew. The old man opened 3 bottles and was handing back the corkscrew when Mr. Henchy said to the boy, Would you like a drink, boy? If you please, sir, said the boy. The old man opened another bottle, grudgingly, and handed it to the boy. What age are you? He asked. 17, said the boy. As the old man said nothing further, the boy took the bottle, said, Here's my best respects, sir, to Mr. Henchy, drank the contents, put the bottle back on the table, and wiped his mouth with his sleeve. Then he took up the corkscrew and went out of the door sideways, muttering some form of salutation. That's the way it begins, said the old man. The tin in at the wedge, said Mr. Henchy. The old man distributed the 3 bottles which he had opened, and the men drank from them simultaneously. After having drank, each placed his bottle on the mantelpiece within hand's reach and drew in a long breath of satisfaction. Well, I did a good day's work today, said Mr. Henchy after a pause. That's so, John. Next.
Yes, I got him 1 or 2 sure things in Dawson Street, Crofton, and myself. Between ourselves, you know, Crofton, he's a decent chap, of course, but he's not worth a damn as a canvasser. He has no word to throw to a dog. He stands and looks at people while I do the talking. Here, 2 men entered the room. One of them was a very fat man, whose blue serge clothes seemed to be in danger of falling from his sloping figure. He had a big face which resembled a young ox's face in expression, staring blue eyes and a grizzled mustache. The other man, who was much younger and frailer, had a thin, clean-shaven face, wore a very high double collar and a wide-brimmed bowler hat. Hello, Crofton, said Mr. Henchy to the fat man. Talk of the devil. Where'd the booze come from? Asked the young man. Did the cow calve? Oh, of course. Lyons spots the drink first thing, said Mr. O'Connor, laughing. Is that the way you chaps canvass? Said Mr. Lyons. And Crofton and I out in the cold and rain looking for votes? Why, blast your soul, said Mr. Henchy. I'd get more votes in 5 minutes than you two'd get in a week. Open 2 bottles of stout, Jack, said Mr. O'Connor. How can I, said the old man, when there's no corkscrew? Wait now, said Mr. Henchy, getting up quickly. Did you ever see this little trick? He took 2 bottles from the table and, carrying them to the fire, put them on the hob. Then he sat down again by the fire and took a bottle. Mr. Lyons sat at the edge of the table, pushed his hat towards the nape of his neck, and began to swing his legs. Which is my bottle? He asked. This lad, said Mr. Henchy. Mr. Crofton sat down on a box and looked fixedly at the other bottle on the hob. He was silent for 2 reasons. The first, sufficient in itself, was that he had nothing to say. The second reason was that he considered his companions beneath him. He'd been a canvasser for Wilkins, the Conservative. When the Conservatives had withdrawn their men and, choosing the lesser of 2 evils, given their support to the Nationalist candidate, he'd been engaged to work for Mr. Cherney. Katrina?
In a few minutes, an apologetic poke was heard as the cork flew out of Mr. Lyons' bottle. Mr. Lyons jumped off the table, went to the fire, took his bottle, and carried it back to the table. I was just telling them, Crofton, said Mr. Henchy, that we got a good few votes today. Who did you get? Asked Mr. Lyons. Well, I got Parks for 1, and I got Atkinson for 2, and I got Ward of Dawson Street. Fine old chap he is, too. Regular old toff, old Conservative. But isn't your candidate a nationalist? Said he. He's a respectable man, said I. He's in favor of whatever will benefit this country. He's a big ratepayer, I said. He has an extensive house property in the city and 3 places of business, and isn't it to his own advantage to keep down the rates? He's a prominent and respected citizen, said I, and a poor law guardian, and he doesn't belong to any party, good, bad, or indifferent. That's the way to talk to him, to them. And what about the address to the king, said Mr. Lyons, after drinking and smacking his lips. Listen to me, said Mr. Henchy. What we want in this country, as I said to old Ward, is capital. The king's coming here will mean an influx of money into this country. The citizens of Dublin will benefit by it. Look at all the factories down by the quays there, idle. Look at all the money there is in the country if we only worked the old industries, the mills, the shipbuilding yards and factories. It's capital we want. But look here, John, said Mr. O'Connor, why should we welcome the King of England? Didn't Parnell himself? Parnell, said Mr. Henchy, is dead. Duncan.
Now, here's the way I look at it. Here's this chap come to the throne after his bloody old mother, keeping him out of it till the man was gray. He's a man of the world. He means well by us. He's a jolly, fine, decent fellow, if you ask me. And no damn nonsense about him. He just says to himself, the old one never went to see these bloody Irish people. By Christ, I'll go myself and see what they're like. And are we going to insult the man when he comes over here on a friendly visit? Eh? Isn't that right, Crofton? Crofton nodded his head. But after all now, said Mr. Lyons argumentatively, King Edward's life, you know, is not the very... Let bygones be bygones, said Mr. Henchy. I admire the man personally. He's just an ordinary knockabout like you and me. He's fond of his glass of grog, and he's a bit of a rake, perhaps. And he's a good sportsman. Damn it! Can't we Irish play fair? Next.
That's all very fine, said Mr. Lyons, but look at the case of Parnell now. In the name of God, said Mr. Henchy, where's the analogy between the 2 cases? What I mean, said Mr. Lyons, is we have our ideals. Why now would we welcome a man like that? Do you think now, after what he did, Parnell was a fit man to lead us? And why then would we do it for Edward VII? This is Parnell's anniversary, said Mr. O'Connor, and don't let us stir up any bad blood. We all respect him now that he's dead and gone, even the Conservatives, he added, turning to Mr. Crofton. Hawk, the tardy cork, fell out of Mr. Crofton's bottle. Mr. Crofton got up from his box and went to the fire. As he returned with his capture, he said in a deep voice, our side of the house respects him because he was a gentleman. Right you are, Crofton, said Mr. Hanchley fiercely. He was the only man that could keep the bag of cats in order. Down, ye dogs, lie down, ye curs. That's the way he treated them. Come in, Joe. Come in, he called out, catching sight of Mr. Hines in the doorway. Mr. Hines came in slowly. Next, please.
Open another bottle of stout, Jack, said Mr. Henchy. Oh, I forgot there's no corkscrew. Here, show me one here and I'll put it at the fire. The old man handed him another bottle and he placed it on the hob. Sit down, Joe, said Mr. O'Connor. We were just talking about the chief. Aye, said Mr. Henchy. Mr. Hines sat on the side of the table near Mr. Lyons, but said nothing. There's one of them anyhow, said Mr. Henchy, that didn't renege him. By God, I say for you, Joe, no, by God, you stuck to him like a man. Oh, Joe, said Mr. O'Connor suddenly, give us that thing you wrote. Do you remember? Have you got it on you? Aye, said Mr. Henchy. Give us that. Did you ever hear that, Crofton? Listen to this now. Splendid thing. Go on, said Mr. O'Connor. Fire away, Joe. Mr. Hines did not seem to remember at once the piece to which they were alluding. But after reflecting a while, he said, oh, that thing is at a... Sure, that's old now. Out with it, man, said Mr. O'Connor. Shh, shh, said Mr. Henchy. Now, Joe. Mr. Hines hesitated a little longer. Then, amid the silence, he took off his hat, laid it on the table and stood up. He seemed to be rehearsing the piece in his mind. After a rather long pause, he announced, Joyce.
The death of Parnell, 6th October, 1891. He cleared his throat once or twice and then began to recite. He is dead. Our uncrowned king is dead. Oh, Erin, mourn with grief and woe, for he lies dead, whom the fell gang of modern hypocrites laid low. He lies slain by the coward hounds he raised to glory from the mire, and Erin's hopes and Erin's dreams perish upon her monarch's pyre. In palace, cabin, or in cot, the Irish heart, where'er it be, is bowed with woe, for he is gone, who would have wrought her destiny. Next.
He would have had his Erin famed, the green flag gloriously unfurled, her statesmen, bards, and warriors raised before the nations of the world. He dreamed, alas, 'twas but a dream, of liberty, but as he strove to touch that idol, treachery sundered him from the thing he loved. Shame on the coward caitiff hands that smote their lord, or with a kiss betrayed him to the rabble rout of fawning priests, no friends of his. May everlasting shame consume to the memory of those who tried to befoul and smear the exalted name of one who spurned them in his pride. He fell as fall the mighty ones, nobly undaunted to the last, and death has now united him with Erin's heroes of the past. No sound of strife disturb his sleep. Calmly he rests. No human pain or high ambition spurs him now the peaks of glory to attain. They had their way, they laid him low, but Erin, list, his spirit may rise like the phoenix from the flames when breaks the dawning of the day that brings us freedom's reign. And on that day may Erin well pledge in the cup she lifts to joy, one grief, the memory of her.
Mr. Hines sat down again on the table. When he had finished his recitation, there was a silence and then a burst of clapping. Even Mr. Lyons clapped. The applause continued for a little time. When it had ceased, all the auditors drank from their bottles in silence. Oh, The cork flew out of Mr. Hines' bottle, but Mr. Hines remained sitting, flushed and bareheaded, on the table. He did not seem to have heard the invitation. "Good man, Joe," said Mr. O'Connor, taking out his cigarette papers and pouch the better to hide his emotion. "What do you think of that, Crofton?" cried Mr. Henchy. "Isn't that fine?" "What?" Mr. Crofton said that it was a very fine piece of writing.
Is that a poem by Joyce, or is that a poem that is part of the history of Ireland?
Let me see. The poem. I have a note that I could read.
Okay.
The poem is in the tradition of innumerable patriotic verses of the period, including one about Parnell, which was given the title A To Healy, though Joyce, in a letter of November in 1916, referred to it as Parnell. This was written by the precocious 9-year-old James and was printed and distributed by John Joyce, the poet's proud father. What remains of it begins, my cot, alas, that dear old shady home. In Finnegan's Wake, Joyce parodies his own work. There's a quotation there. And then Parnell's Faithful Few, edited around this time by Mrs. Leamy, printed poems under Mr. Hines, similar to Mr. Hines's. The book included one by Catherine Tynan, and also the following: "He is not dead, he cannot die. Remember it, brothers, early and late. Our king is buried, but not his heart. He leads us onward to slay the foe. His voice is the battle cry and our bugle call. From among the dead, where over all he standeth tall." And then there's another bit of poetry, a lament from October the 11th, 1891 by Hugh Ashworth Taylor, and from The Dead Chief by Edna Carberry. This is the poem. "We made of our hearts' love a mantle that monarch of men might have worn, and we knew not the brave brows were bleeding neath the torture of men's a thorn. Woe to the stranger who prompted the sons of our land to disgrace. Woe to the hypocrite whining that flaunted in creed in your face. Woe to the false friend and the Judas who smote you to death in your place." That's from my book, the annotation.
I have a note also that Henchley is Simon Dedalus.
Simon Dedalus.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my.
He kind of sounds like what you'd expect him to be. And I think Stanislaus said it was a toned down version of his father.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But he has that kind of, he has those kind of remarks, throwaway remarks, kind of, that's what you would expect from Stanislaus, John Joyce.
Sit down. Go sit down.
It's also the one where Joyce, I think Duncan was reading there. He had bloody in this, or bloody something, but Joyce, they wanted Joyce to take out those words, and in a lot of editions the words are missing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Bloody is missing, but I think Duncan read. I think you read Bloody, Duncan, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Mm-hmm.
Bloody Mother, and there was another one where he referred to the Bloody Owl one, which was the Queen, you know.
Yeah.
But so they wanted Joyce to remove that and remove mention of, I think, King Edward VII. So Joyce wrote to the King of England I think Edward VII died in 1910, and there was another guy on the throne,
George V.
George V. Yeah, and in his previous arguments with the London publisher Grant Richards, Richards never raised any kind of objection to this mention. But when he had switched to Roberts in Dublin, Roberts objected to the Queen, and Joyce wrote to him saying, "Well, why would you object when the other editor didn't object? And now that Edward VII is dead, do you know what I mean? What difference does it make?" But anyway, he wrote to the King of England, King George, and asked him, did he object to mentioning King Edward VII? And he got a reply, but it was just to say that, that we don't comment on such matters or something like that,
Yeah, the secretary is instructed to. That's a letter that it is not appropriate to our rule.
Something like that.
Something words I'm going to front.
Yeah.
It's like the CIA. The CIA can neither confirm nor deny.
Yeah.
Deflect whenever possible.
Yeah, it was kind of smacked of kings don't do this sort of stuff.
But I always think of Joyce kind of going straight to the top about anything. He's so persistent, and even going back to the portrait where he's pandied in the wrong, and he goes up to the top guy in the I don't know, was it Conley or whoever it was?
Yeah, Conley, yeah.
And, he goes up to him, he goes in. So and those other occasions as well, I think over Exiles, over the argument about the trousers with some English actor, he wrote to the British Embassy,
A private car.
Yeah.
And he puts one of the rough soldiers in this nighttime.
Yeah. So
priceless. But there doesn't seem to be any other level in this story that I have been able to see. The way there are allegorical levels sometimes in but this one seems to be straight. Just this is
it catches the flavor and the atmosphere of all those people coming and going, and the bottles put on the stove and popping and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's 1905, and it's 1891 when Parnell died, and
14
years ago. Or you can think back to something that happened in the year 2000, and a bunch of guys are still meeting up to regret the passing of, and they're all 24 years older than they were.
I think also the one thing there is that he mentions the corkscrew again, and at the end of the play, they're looking for the corkscrew as well. Do you know what I mean? Couldn't find the corkscrew.
These fellas, they can't even, they're fighting an election, but they can't even organize a few bottles to open.
Yeah.
They're missing the essential element.
Well, didn't the boy walk off with it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They sent him back. They sent him back with it. The boy.
Oh, they sent him back with it.
They sent him back with it. They opened some bottles and then they sent him back.
Yeah. His job probably depended on coming back with it, and he was supposed to come back with empties as well. From the last time, I presume, that they got a free few bottles. These guys couldn't roll a ball down a hill successfully.
This is it strikes me a very dispirited.
Yeah.
They're having a meeting to celebrate their chief, right?
Yeah.
Parnell. And yet, just from their conversation and the atmosphere, in a mere 11, 12 years, it's like the air has gone out of the balloon.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. They're a lost cause. Do you want to see the building on a share screen where this story is set? it's
Yeah, let me
I
get
don't
it.
know. Like, I mean, it's a very limited view of it, but see if I have it.
Let's see what I can do
Do I
here.
do that?
Okay.
I know. I think I have to share the screen rather than you.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out.
Okay.
Hold on. We've been through this before. I think I
Oh,
can
I'm
make
allowed to
you.
do it. I'm allowed to do it.
You're allowed to do it?
Oh, no, no. Host disabled participant screen sharing. So
Okay,
that's
well, here, see
we
if you
had
can
that
do it
before.
now. I just made you the co-host.
Yeah.
Is that gonna do it?
Not yet.
Okay, here, I'm gonna
This will
make you
stop
the.
other screen sharing. Do you want to continue? Yes, I would do. That's
Okay.
the point. Now, how do I go to, where do I get to here from there? Doodle-doo-doo.
Maybe I should stop my sharing and let you
I
do it.
think so. Yeah, I think so. Nah, it's more like it. I've got my screen back.
Okay.
And there we go. Let's have a look around the street. Before we.
Okay, hold on.
It's the city of, it's Dublin.
It's not sharing, Joe.
Was
Here we
not
go.
sharing, not sharing,
No.
not
No.
sharing.
Does it say that does
You
it
got
say
your screen back, but you got all of us as well.
Got all of us back. Yeah, and
let me put on speaker,
let's
see
go
if that
again.
okay.
Share screen and share. Oh, I didn't push buttons to share. That's
There you go. Now I'm
There
viewing.
we
Joe,
go. Nothing can stop us now. Go. This is Grafton Street up here, if anyone knows it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is Wicklow Street. And the if I could just get myself to turn around, I think if I whoops a daisy, that was not a good move, was it? There we go. Let's go back into it. Okay, now I can turn around. And I need to turn the other way.
We're looking up Wicklow Street.
We're looking up Wicklow Street now.
Mhm.
And we go to about here. And on a little bit more, I've gone past it. It's only one door. That lady is standing. There we go.
Okay.
That's number 13.
Mm-hmm.
Can't get right to this before she locking up for the day. That's number 13. You can see there, number 13.
Okay, so is it just the bottom floor that's all modernized?
Yeah, and it's quite a nice building. If we look upwards, I can't get to the other side of the street to give you the view, but I don't know whether the committee is in the green window or in the little window that boxes out. But I think even that present photograph is now gone. And last time I was down there was a bookshop at the back, called the Secret Bookshop or something. Because you had to go.
Yeah, that's still there, Joe. The Secret Bookshop and the Secret Record Shop.
Yeah, the Secret Record Shop. The Wicklow Street Clinic is gone, and so presumably you go upstairs there. People have gone upstairs. I know people that have gone upstairs and been in the committee room, but
they've never come back.
They've never come back, and they disappear in a time-space syndrome. But that's what that's what the road looks like. You see the other side of the street. It's kind of it's fashionable, very fashionable place. You can.
Looks so different from what you expect.
Yeah, it's off it's just off the fancy shopping street for Dublin, of Grafton Street. Which is all, kind of, you can see it's like every other bloody street in the world, but that's it, and they're just up there, up that narrow winding stairs, or I've looked up the stairs and it's distinctly uninviting and run down, and I think it was like that in 1905 as well. So that's it, and they're a relatively short distance from various hostelries
Yes.
that you could easily get to if you were so minded. But I won't take us on a trip to them now. But that's it. I'll stop sharing now, so you can all get back to
Okay.
it. Would have been local shops.
Thank you very
Stop
much.
sharing has got up
Yeah.
here.
Interesting. Yeah.
Can reach it. If I can reach it, there we go. Boom.
All
Well
right.
done.
Ooh.
Oh, thank you, Joe.
Thanks for that, Joe.
Well,
Mhm.
for what
Thank
it's
you.
worth, for what it's worth, but the wonders of modern technology, isn't it?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So
So here's a trivial question for sure. I've never been drinking in Ireland, but one of the things that popped out of me was when they finally got the corkscrew and they opened some beers. The way that it's written, it's almost like they each took their bottle of beer and just it was
Yeah.
gone, like
Yeah.
that fast.
they drank it
So-
by they
They
drank it
drank
by
it.
the neck. You see, they like these fellas. They couldn't organize a piss up in a brewery. You know, they've no tumblers. They've no glasses to drink out of.
Right,
I
and
I think that we're drinking all day by the time we get to this point in the
May
story.
not, may
Yeah.
not have been the first sup of the day, as it's unlikely to have been. So
uh,
it's
it's quite a contrast actually with all that maudlin stuff that happens in the Hades section of Ulysses,
yeah,
where they're going to go around and pay respects to the chief,
yeah.
you
Mm.
know, and everybody gets weepy and all
Lonely
that kind of stuff.
He's coming back someday. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And in this thing, it's kind of like they're going through the paces, but there's no real spirit there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think the elections, anyone knows more, Tony, you might know more about it than me, that for centuries, to be a councillor in Dublin, it was a birthright. You know, it's something
Yes.
you inherited, and it had very shortly before that had become an elected, or parts of it were elected positions. I don't know whether it's 10 years or 40 years. I don't know if you know, but like
I don't.
elections
But
still relatively new. The whole idea
yeah.
that
Mhm.
that the natives had a vote of any sort
Mhm. Mhm.
was new. And then there was in 1890, that's the year before Parnell died. I was very surprised to come across a book which is published about a month, 2 months ago in the UK, about the Irish famine. And it book is called A Forgotten Famine. And it deals with the famine of 1890.
Mhm.
You know, Joyce was 8 years of age when bad weather caused the crops to fail. And the British government made all the same mistakes that they made in the big famines of the 1840s. And there was a lot of direct action in which the Catholic Church played a major part in raising funds abroad, including America, and
Mhm.
provided funds to farmers in Ireland to buy seeds, which they
Mhm.
hadn't been able to get, and averted a major famine. And that the point we made in this book, I had never even heard of the avoided famine of 1890.
No.
That this is what gave rise to nationalist thought, that we really could do things better ourselves, and sort of fueled all these non-peaceful nationalist frames of mind that, you know, come to fruition in the 1910 type, you know, the early 1900s. And I like to the idea that there was a famine in 1890. You know, my grandmother was a child then.
Mhm.
So it's kind of,
And this might have been the famine that Maud Gonne went to Mayo on behalf of, as you're saying, got all the people to meet with the authorities and then insisted that the authorities pay the people to plant the seeded
yeah,
potatoes.
yeah.
Yeah, they got paid to do the work.
Yeah, that sounds very like it. Maud Gonne is
Mhm.
mentioned as well in that. And but it's one of the reasons for, you know, the great row on the portrait at Christmas.
Hmm.
Why
Mhm.
this generation of people who respect the church,
Mhm.
you know, because they saw what happened when they were young, and they're saying, you know, like, you know, you got to follow the church. They're our leaders, and so
Yeah.
on and forth. And you can see that frame of mind made great sense. I could never understand how people just accepted but all of a sudden when I read this book, I said, wow.
Okay, so if I'm following your logic there, you're saying because the Catholic Church actually did a good thing in the famine of 1890,
Yeah,
that it wasn't just the religious part of the Catholic Church that had
yeah,
some respect, but it was actually the organizing and the social value of the Catholic
yeah. They were
Church got
they were
a boost there.
they were given a social status, and they were, authority was surrendered to them on
Yeah.
things. And it's also there's another part in Joyce about the, you know, the 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 move to undermine the Galway shipping line, that the Liverpool ring that saw to it that the ship hit the only rock in Galway Bay, and you know, that's mentioned by the sailor. It's mentioned a few times in Ulysses, but
Hmm.
that was a plan to. I mean, they actually did run ships from 1858, I think it was. But on the 16th of June, 1850, whenever, 16th of June, important date, was the date that this ship hit the only rock in Galway Bay. They, on it, the maiden voyage of, you know, and it was delayed for 4 hours to be surveyed. But this got out all over the world that, you know, passenger ship, and the Galway line had difficulties thereafter, because what they were doing, they were offering the cheapest and fastest route to America, which,
Hmm.
and they were operating it from Hamburg. And you got a ferry, you got a train to the British Channel, ferry across, train to Dublin, which is a boat to Dublin, train to Galway on a boat, and you were in America faster and cheaper. And this would put Liverpool out of business. And they said Liverpool. Now, Liverpool never interfered. It's Mr. Deasy even told us about it, you know, the undermining the shipping line. But that was a priest who was famous during the famine that got the money together, got Irish people to invest in that company and to bring this major project to Galway. And despite its sort of dramatic start, the blue ribbon for the fastest ships on the Atlantic were Irish. You
Hmm.
know, it's an Irish shipping line in the middle 1800s.
Okay.
And you know, the technology was changing to, you know, the steam paddle was changing,
Hmm.
all that sort of thing, and put them out of business. But that was a priest as well. And there's that idea that he had done great work during the famine over in Galway, and he was put on the county council there. And as a result, I can't remember his name, but that priest brought uh, gaslight to Galway. You know,
Hmm.
yeah, and when he said, "Well, we're going to have a deep water port as well," everyone went along with him because he was, and the next generation of priests were ready to be like him. So the whole thing was sort of, I learned nothing of that. I learned that from reading Joyce, following the stories. I never heard about it while I was at school.
Mm-hmm.
And hints of
That's
it all.
interesting. So the idea that the first ship hit the only rock, there's no conspiracy in that. That's just blundering.
It's the Indian Empire was the name of the ship. And it was not the only ship to ever hit that rock. I can't remember the name of the rock, but it's named after the British warship that sank on it 30 years before. So, but the pilots on the ship were two Englishmen. They brought Englishmen into, the pilot sails the ship into harbour, and they did not know Galway.
Oh.
And as a result of that, the rumour ran around Galway that two Englishmen had run the ship onto a rock deliberately to get a pile of money. And,
They were paid off to do that.
Yeah, they were
the
paid.
rumor was they were paid off
guilty
to
as
do
hell.
that.
They were
Right?
English. They were guilty as hell. No need for a trial.
Yeah. Actually, that would hold together pretty well, unless it wasn't true.
The harbour commissioners were faced with a riot, and so the police arrested the two guys. But there was no charges brought against them, but one of them then committed suicide. So the whole thing it just ran for weeks all over the world and all over Europe, because Germans were interested in this, the aspect of it as well. So it was a media frenzy.
Yeah,
almost overwhelmed this project.
Joe, you gave us the title of the book, The Forgotten Famine. Would you remember who wrote it?
No, but I'll find out and I'll let you know. I had like a sieve. I probably give you the wrong person.
No.
I will. I'll put that on here next time around.
Great, thanks.
How about the comparison between King Edward and Parnell in terms of their personal lives? I thought that was real interesting. Like Parnell is debased in Ireland, but King Edward is supposed to be welcomed by some of these characters.
Yeah.
Do you know the story of the story says that King Edward had many mistresses, or he was a rake and whatever. And do you know one of those mistresses who was by his side when he died is the present Queen Camilla's grandmother?
No.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
And Parnell married
Kitty.
she was his wife when he died.
And her husband knew about the affair all through the affair.
Yeah.
So I kind of wonder, I mean, he wanted a divorce and he named Parnell, but was he put up for that? I mean, after 4 kids with, Parnell and his wife, did he really have to go through a divorce? Did he have to name the adult? I don't know. It's always bothered me that it was another conniving aspect of putting down Parnell just when he was really uniting the forces too. Yeah.
I think that's pretty well established, is it not?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That the captain was offered, I'm going to go money and a political position later.
Sure.
If he would do that for the English conservatives.
Yeah.
So then they knew that would be the end of
that wouldn't go down well in Ireland.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that boat that Bloom and Millie, Bloom remembers going around Dublin Bay on a little tour boat called the Erin's King. You see, that's named after Parnell, because he was the uncrowned king of Ireland. So you could see the little little reverberations in Joyce's work of these things.
The other thing in this story is going to say is the fire, fanning the flames of the fire, and that's sort of matches their attitudes to Parnell.
Yeah, and the dying embers of the fire.
The dying embers and spitting on the embers.
Duncan's, sort of the life is going out, the fire is going out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they couldn't. I thought it's very forward about Parnell, because I thought you couldn't mention Parnell after what happened, because there was a song, something's Proud Eagle.
Yeah.
Tom, do you know it?
Have you been to Avondale and wandered
Yeah.
in? Yeah, that's it.
So that's the song they sang, because you couldn't talk about Parnell. So Joyce is being very open about it.
Yeah.
And what's the song again?
I think it could be as Orla said. I don't know the name of it, but it begins.
Oh, have you been to Avondale and lingered in it?
For something Vale.
Mm-hmm.
For proud something tell the tale of Avondale's proud eagle. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So this was fairly immediately after Parnell died that the conservative forces pretty much covered up his name. Am I catching that correctly?
Well, as Joe has been saying, that Ireland became progressively more conservative in terms of Catholicism. So if you knew the song, people sang the song because they couldn't talk about him.
Huh.
Doesn't one of the characters in the story have the ivy on the inside of his collar?
Yeah.
It's not like proudly in a outside lapel, it's on the inside.
Does anyone commemorate Ivy Day now? I think some people do, don't they, Tom?
They do, yeah. It's
not
much.
They go up to the graveyard. I think it's more a Joycean thing almost, isn't it? I remember we had a special reading in Swinny's one day for Ivy Day.
Joyce wrote in Trieste in 1912, he wrote a whole article on Parnell, the shade of Parnell.
Lovely.
And it was really a kind of fabulous kind of description of Parnell, and again, talking about the betrayal of Parnell.
Yeah.
And shade of Parnell. And Parnell, of course, had he had a defect in his speech, and he wasn't a great orator, and there's lots of things, and Joyce mentions it in his thing, because there's a lot of things going against him on the face of it, but that, like he says, Parnell defies critical analysis of the power that he really had. And they all recognise it in the English Parliament, even the people that were against him, and that he had some of this kind of presence and power, and and he had bad health as well. So.
So actually, when we look at the Christmas dinner in Portrait of an Artist, Mrs. Riordan was actually on the majority side.
Yeah.
Although she was originally for Parnell, it says, because she hit somebody over the head on the seafront, but she went with the priests in the Catholic Church, and that's what changed a lot of people's mind. Once the priests and the church went against Parnell, they all went, yeah.
Right, right. And it was
Yeah.
actually British, or British leaning politicians that had arranged the whole exposure,
Mm.
um, knowing that Catholic Ireland would freak out,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
knowing that Parnell had an adulteress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the priest, or doesn't Joyce say in Portrait that the priest ordered the people to
Yeah.
dismiss Parnell?
Yeah.
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 I mean, it
Yes.
wasn't just the people deciding; it was that the power of the
Right.
church commanded them to,
Yeah.
condemn
But
him.
the original instigator of the whole thing
Yeah,
was actually British politicians,
Political
I
establishment.
leaning
suspected that, but I didn't
politicians.
know it.
Yeah, I mean it's very
They
clever.
they would just see themselves as bringing the truth to light. I mean, they
Of course,
didn't organize to
of
have
Yeah.
course.
open seduce them and so on, that sort of thing. Like they were just, saving society from the likes of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. My own feeling is that that actually uh, political families that have been in politics for a long time,
Yeah.
they know how to set things up.
Oh,
Mm.
Mhm.
Mm. Yeah.
I was just thinking of a case that I know of where some people let a young person take charge of this very important case. And I just realized the other day that this is likely a setup
Mhm.
for later, that when these wealthy people and their lawyers decide to take revenge, they will not take revenge against the actual power holders in the organization. They
yeah.
will take revenge upon the relatively young and naive person that was put in charge of it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of those things that can unfold over 5 years or 25
Oh,
years.
yeah.
It's- yeah. Wowie zowie.
It would be nice to read some of the speeches that Joyce made, or what we've just talked about, the speeches or the articles that he wrote.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's
They're
a book.
they're in a book, The Critical Writings of James Joyce.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's probably some people have it there, yeah. Ellsworth Mason and Richard Ellman.
Mhm. And a lot of that was done during his time in Trieste, where he was
Exactly, yeah.
doing a little Irish promotion and earning a little bit of money to supplement his
Yeah.
teacher's income.
But it's interesting too that around 1912, I think, that Joyce still felt that whole betrayal of Parnell, and he always carried it with him, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, well, it makes sense since betrayal was such an important
Yeah,
part
yeah,
of his thinking.
yeah.
And to tell you the truth, I mean, I read a very popular, uh, a reasonably well-written book of Irish history, and I was astounded at the amount of betrayal that was portrayed in that book.
I know, yeah. There's always somebody turns up, an informer or something, at all crucial stages in every rebellion that Ireland ever had. There was always somebody turned up to betray somebody along the line, yeah, again and again.
Yeah. Of course, I don't think that's a uniquely Irish thing, but I think that perhaps in some of the Irish historians and Irish people in literature have done a better job of bringing that out.
Hmm.
On in other countries, it tends to still lurk on the edges.
I know in the negotiations uh, for the with the English after the War of Independence,
Yeah.
they said that there was that was happening during the negotiations, and they looked at all the men, and all the men had secretaries, and the secretaries were women, and they never looked at the secretaries.
Mm.
They
Hmm.
presumed immediately it was someone important and a man. And I was watching the documentary, and I said, those men weren't typing that stuff themselves. I mean, someone was typing it for them.
Yes.
And it's International Women's Day in a few days, and I thought,
Okay.
you might as well say we can be as bad as them too.
Mm.
I would never say that first, Orla, but since you said it, I concur. Yeah, this has always been true. That not only women but also slaves, servants of all kinds are they are treated as if they're not there.
Mhm.
But it's taken as fact within those communities that they very well were. They were there, and they knew what was going on. There's an interesting sociological historical book called Weapons of the Weak.
Oh,
And it points out in that book that one of the weapons is the fact that because they are regarded as virtually non-existent, um, that the quote the lesser sex and the minorities actually know a lot more and hear a lot more because they just happen to be there and nobody's paying any attention to them.
That's the mistake that the Cairo gang made in Dublin. The Cairo gang were a bunch of assassins that the British sent to live in Dublin with a view to assassinating the entire Irish government during the War of Independence. And they had fake wives and everything, but they used to meet in Grafton Street in a cafe and discuss their plans. And there was a waitress who heard everything, you know, and she was a member of Sinn Féin. And she just passed the message up the line. And that's how Michael Collins was able to assassinate them all on the one morning, except I can't remember the numbers. I think one or two or three was it got away. One had changed address, so he just wasn't home. But they all got the knock on the door at 8:30 on the morning of Bloody Sunday, and that's why it's called Bloody Sunday, because of that's triggered the set of events, and the whole plan just fell apart because of probably a slip of a girl, a Nora Barnacle age group, 17 or 18 years of age, cleaning the tables, day after day, she's just picking up everything, what they were, So it's exactly what you're saying, Duncan, the weapons of the weak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And invisibility is one of the major weapons.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And, I mean, and it's kind of a truism in sociological thinking that because of their weaker status, that women are much more astute at seeing what's going on
Yeah.
because it's a survival necessity. So and they tend to know that a lot of behavior is very surface behavior, covering up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
A lot of
Like,
stuff.
women see through men like a sheet of glass, that you just get over it. If you've got sisters and aunts, accept the fact, that generally they know more than you about everything, and just get on with what you do,
Mhm,
play football or something.
There's a description of Countess Markovich during the 1916 Rising. I think she was up around Stephen's Green, and
Yeah.
it said she had a cigarette in one hand and a revolver in the other.
Yeah.
So yeah, she was
And
she was in the kind of thick of it there.
yeah, and
Yeah.
the British couldn't. The city hall was held by the rebels, and
Yeah.
they couldn't get out of Dublin Castle by that gate and all this sort of stuff. And the soldiers couldn't figure the accuracy of the gunfire coming from the place. They weren't able to approach, and they then planned to shell it from Trinity College and destroy the whole, beautiful building of City Hall. And one officer, what happened was that the people there ran out of ammunition, surrendered, and the British were astonished to find they were all girls. There were no men.
Mm.
They had held them up for days,
Mhm.
and then they said, no, the real gunmen are still in there. Where it's a trap. We're not going in. We'll shell the place anyway. And one British officer volunteered to go in and see that the building was clear, because he saw it as a dreadful loss to destroy a building like this. And he took his life in his hands, went in and found the place empty, that it was the girls. And they didn't know what to do with them. What they did, like they were people, the volunteers, the rebels were being arrested, but they didn't think they could arrest women. So they told them, go home and tell your mother what you just did. And they released all these gun girls back to their families. Sort of the naivety of it is wonderful, isn't it? All the girls then sort of presumably go on to continue their careers as gunmen.
But wasn't Countess Markwitz arrested for the 1916 uprising?
Yeah, but she was at a different level.
She was.
She was aristocracy, but they let her go.
They let her
Had to
go.
let her go, yeah.
There is, there's some doubt about her toll of people that she shot. Sort of. Some people say that she actually murdered a policeman. I don't know how true that is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
She was convicted and sentenced to death, but because she was a woman, the British commuted that.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyways. All this from Mr. Parnell. I wonder what history was like if things had taken a different turn.
Yeah.
All right. To be continued.
This story could be read again.
Yes, I want to
there
read
will
it
be
again.
some time in the future.
Yeah.
The next case, we will go on to a mother. And I'll list two stories, and we'll see if we read one or two.
Yeah.
But certainly, we had plenty to do today.
Yeah.
It's been good. Just a reminder, line yourself up a copy of Under Milkwood.
Wood.
Yes, Under Milkwood. I tried to get these monarch butterflies off my mind.
You keep saying weed, Duncan. You keep saying weed, and that's suggestive of something else.
Yeah, well, the reason I say weed is because monarch butterflies are a big topic among ecological and biology types, because that is the only food that monarch butterflies will eat.
Right.
In the United States, as we have expanded our agricultural areas and have used things like Roundup and other pesticides,
Yeah.
we have destroyed amazing percentages of the monarch butterfly food.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And these butterflies are kind of really admired by some people because they literally fly like 1,000 miles.
Mhm.
Wow.
Well, there's like
Uh,
4 generations that start out and traverse the country up to Canada and down to Mexico.
yeah,
The generation that well, the 3 generations have never done the trip before. I mean, it's an amazing story of their instinct, and then they need the
yeah,
milkweed along the way. That's part of the whole survival.
yeah. And the other thing that happens is that they will gather for resting places
Hmm.
and mating and all that. They will gather in forest.
Hmm.
And you can walk into a forest with monarch butterflies, and the trees will be totally covered
Hmm.
by these red and black butterflies. I mean, everything's just covered from top to bottom. It's quite an amazing sight. And once you see it, you never forget. I'm sure you can find the examples on YouTube, which will be nice.
Mm.
But to actual see it in person is
Yeah.
like wowie zowie. So
What is
that's a long way to explain why I make the mistake of using milkweed instead of milkwood. Anyway, lots of fun here.
Mhm.
always?
And I look forward to the
At
next time.
Finnegan's Wake.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.